Hello, and welcome to one more edition of What Matters Most. This is actually our 7th edition. We've been on the air since last year, and we tend to focus on history and community and the environment and racial justice and inclusion and so forth. And this edition is going to be dedicated to celebrating the environment because, as you know, or you may not know, April 23rd is Earth Day. Today, we are bringing a guest that will discuss with us some of the environmental issues that we face here in New Hampshire and also discuss water contamination issues, and we will be chatting also about her book. She has written a book about women and their presence in science and the challenges that they face. Our guest today will be Mindi Messmer. Mindi, welcome to the show.
I am so delighted to have you. It's been quite a while since I've been trying to get you to be on the show, What Matters Most. And I couldn't have wished for a better time for you to be on the show because we're celebrating on April 23rd. We're going to be celebrating Earth Day. And you have been such a tireless and wonderful advocate for the community, for our environment, and for water contamination and many, many more issues. So welcome to the show. I wanted to say a little bit about you, but I will let you say that. I know that you were a former state rep for the state of New Hampshire, and you also ran for Congress a few years ago. And we thank you because you would have been one of the few scientists that run for office, not many out there. So welcome to the show, Mindi.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. And thank you so much for doing this virtually. I mean, I remain concerned about the level of COVID-19 infection. And, you know, when other people in your family are vulnerable to, especially vulnerable to COVID-19, it's important for us to watch the science and still protect our family members. So happy to be able to join you this way. And you're right, not many scientists run for office, and there's probably a good reason for that, but I appreciate it. Yeah, my background is environmental and public health science, and felt that it was really important. You know, a state rep at the time who has now taken a higher office asked me to run for office. And my first instinct to him was, I'm a scientist. I sit behind a computer all day for, forever. I can't be a politician. It's not my personality, but he told me it's important to have people paying attention to science-based policy, and he was so right. So
Absolutely.
Happy to be here and continue to try to help here in the state of New Hampshire, because we need help.
We need help, and I thank you for your service, because this is a very important service to the community. And we have been seeing you advocating for the environment for the longest while. And I'm a lover of planet Earth. I support any kind of initiative that has to do with protecting our environment. And we do need more stringent environmental protections put in place. We are now seeing that our water in so many communities, our water is contaminated or has nitrogen and PFAS and so forth. And I would like to see more people involved, for example, in removing plastics from the foods that we buy, and eating less beef, so that we can make sure the environment is better. But I mean, what is your take on that?
It's really important. I'm really glad to join you so close to Earth Day, because, one thing I learned when I was in Concord was the power of the industry lobby, and really understood that I could say whatever I wanted to say all day long about the science and the facts and the evidence and talk about them. But what really mattered was how hard and how powerful the lobby was that pushed back on that. So what I recognized was it is so important to make sure that people know that, to just get that word out, to build a coalition of support among the rest of us, to be that lobby for the environment, for our public health, that has to fight against this very powerful lobby. So, and it's not just Concord, it's Washington, D.C. You know, it is the power of the people that are informed, that speak out and pay attention to what's happening and hold their elected officials accountable is so important. You know, there are a lot of officials, yeah, in the state of New Hampshire in particular, you know, it's very challenging right now, the way the state legislature is composed to get anything passed that really will help us.
Right.
So
this is where it is
better.
important. It is important to have representation.
Absolutely.
And people have to think carefully before they vote. Is this person I'm voting for going to protect my community, my environment? Forget about political divisions and focus on what's good for you and your family. And I think that's when we can make a difference in choosing who we vote for. And I'm so thankful to you for doing that, for representing your community, and for continuing to fight for a number of issues that concern the community, including our water contamination.
Right.
And,
I mean, cancer doesn't care what political party you say you're ascribing to. It doesn't care.
It does
Just
not
like
care.
COVID, it doesn't care.
Right. It doesn't choose who it will affect. And we know that the PFAS, I can never say the full name, perfluoro, you know, I can't finish. I say PFAS because it's much easier, but it includes PFOAS, it includes the regular PFAS. Right. That has been an issue here in New Hampshire. And can you update us on where we're at with that fight?
Right. So, you know, when I was an elected official, I brought the first bill that was signed into law, actually, a couple of years later, that compelled the state of New Hampshire to recognize that these per and polyfluoroalkyl substances represent a threat to public health. And we're seeing it play out in all of our communities across, especially southern New Hampshire right now. So these chemicals are a group of, every day it seems like the list gets longer. The EPA now recognizes there are 12,039 PFAS chemicals in existence. We in the state of New Hampshire are lucky to regulate 4 of them. Wow. 4 out of 12,029 or 12,039 chemicals. Other states like Massachusetts and Vermont have moved to regulate 6 of them, but still you can tell we are far behind the industry that manufactures these. These are not natural compounds. These are man-made compounds. They are very persistent in the environment. They're very persistent in your body. Once they get in your body, we don't know how to get them out. And once they get into the environment, into our drinking water, into our surface water, into our soil, it is very difficult, if at all, to be able to remove them, and very expensive. So what we need to do is prevent them from getting to our environment before they actually get there. So
that's a lot of work ahead to do that.
There's a lot of work.
Holding polluters accountable, and for the cleanup, and to not continue to pollute the environment and our wells, which is, you know, an issue that I have been very, very worried about, because I have family here. I have my granddaughter and my daughter. Just, you know, they moved here, and I was very concerned. I had to install some of the filters that you have to put in to get rid of the PFAS. And it's called forever chemicals for a reason, just like what you described. We don't know how to get rid of it, and there is evidence that it causes a wide variety of cancers.
Right. Yes. So in southern New Hampshire, where you're from, there is an industry called Saint-Gobain Performance Plastics. They are a plastics manufacturer. They do things like they coat materials with these PFAS chemicals, because the PFAS chemicals have certain properties that make them specifically great for things like raincoats, or for chemical protective gear for firefighters, or for our defense industry. but they are being spewed out of that plant in Merrimack every day, all day long. And they are, in the last year or so, this industry has finally put a treatment system on their stacks to remove some of those, hopefully most of those PFAS chemicals from the air emissions. But in the meantime, the community has asked for a really thorough analysis of the public health in the area. And in 2018, I believe it was, the state of New Hampshire issued a report that said there's nothing to see here. There's no high rates of cancer in Merrimack. Merrimack is one of the towns. As you know, there are a growing number of towns where these impacts have been detected. There was initially an area around the plant, a 65 square mile area, that the state acknowledged was caused by Saint-Gobain, and Saint-Gobain agreed to pay for bottled water for residents, now totaling 995 people in that vicinity. However, there's an area, it didn't just pay attention to those lines that are outlined on the map. The chemicals spread further. And now we know of at least another 1,000+ residences outside of that area where their private wells have been impacted by these chemicals.
It's awful.
Yes, and the towns now are including Merrimack, Bedford, Litchfield, Londonderry, and now Hudson. So it's growing instead of getting more controlled. It continues to expand instead of us really understanding how far those impacts spread. So the state of New Hampshire issued this report in 2018 that looked at the cancer rates just in Merrimack itself, not any of these other towns. And they said, nothing to see here. There's no cancer that is of concern. A group of us community members continued to ask for a much more thorough analysis instead of comparing the rates of cancer just to the state of New Hampshire, which already has really high rates of cancer. New Hampshire, actually, just as a side thing, we have a pediatric cancer cluster on the seacoast, but we also have the highest rates of pediatric cancer in the nation in New Hampshire. And we have the highest rates of breast cancer.
That's absolutely unacceptable. And when I hear people say the state of New Hampshire and the governor's giving a speech, the state of New Hampshire is strong and good, and then we have the highest pediatric cancer in the nation, that's not good. That's not good.
No, it's horrible. I mean, children are unfortunately the canaries in the coal mine, right? The
Exactly.
first, they're most vulnerable to the effects of chemicals and things like that. And with high rates of children with cancer, the last thing we want to do is create lifelong challenges for these children, because of their environment exposure. So,
Absolutely.
we also have high rates of breast cancer. We have high rates of esophageal cancer in your throat. We have high rates of bladder cancer, the highest in the nation in our little state of New Hampshire. So
that's absolutely disturbing, to say the least.
Yes, it is disturbing.
And to leave this in the hands of activists and others, and our government is not doing enough, because we're not voting the right way for people that will actually help to bring this to an end, or to stop it, or to slow it down. And I'm so grateful that you have been so active, informing people, educating people about this issue, because we can do so many things. We can, talk about, the economy, and we have the lowest rates of the minimum wage is very low in New Hampshire. We want to raise that, and that's a very big issue. We have other fights, we're trying to get this state to do the right thing. But the right thing to do is to get rid of this idea that we are the worst as far as pediatric cancer, as far as some types of cancers are concerned, which means a state that would otherwise be very, very healthy, because, as you know,
yes,
we have more trees probably than any other state, perhaps other than Vermont. It should be a healthy state. It's a beautiful state.
right.
And to think of these chemicals just flying around, and I understand that PFAS actually flies in the air and then settles on the ground. Is that how it spreads?
That's exactly, so it's coming out of the stacks of these pipes that Saint-Gobain has. I think they have at least 12 of them. It comes out of those stacks, it burps out of those stacks, and it flies up into the air and then eventually settles down onto the ground or into the water, into the surface water bodies like lakes and ponds. That's another thing that, you know, has recently happened is the state has issued a no take order on fish in some of the ponds around Merrimack because of the levels of PFAS in those fish. So it's not just, you know, it's water, it's our entire environment. It's animals, it's food, it's concerns over food, you know, that you grow in your garden and whether that's being impacted, things that we don't know. And so we really have to shift this narrative around. We have to, instead of being industry friendly, which New Hampshire loves to say, our governor likes to talk about how friendly our, you know, economy is for business. We have to shift that to, let's be friendly to the people that live here and take a precaution that prevents exposure to these chemicals and possible and prevent cancers and things like that before we get out of control more than we already are. Rather than erring on the side of protecting industry,
right,
let's protect the people.
Right.
Right.
And I understand a lot of these, some of these polluters like Saint-Gobain and maybe others, the fact that they chose New Hampshire was because there were no controls in place. They were told, come on in, you can come pollute us, basically. There were no guidelines telling them, don't pollute our, you know, our wells or, you know, the environment. They were not given stringent directions and indications as to how they should conduct their business to protect the communities.
And I want to back that up with facts. An investigative reporter for New Hampshire Public Radio a few years uncovered internal communications from Saint-Gobain on their decision to move from Bennington, Vermont, which they also polluted, to move to New Hampshire because they were promised that they wouldn't have to install this treatment system on their stacks that they've now had to put in. But they were allowed for since 2002 to 2020 to operate without protecting us. You know, they did move from Bennington, they polluted it there extensively. That investigation is still unfolding. Along with what we saw as high rates of cancer in Bennington, Vermont, the same types of cancers we see at high rates here in Merrimack now. And, you know, they moved here expressly because they weren't going to have to put these treatment systems on to protect us, to save money.
Oh, that's right. It's just, I am just outraged. I don't know what to say. It's shameful, to say the least, that our government, people that are in charge of our government, our governor, our elected representatives, I don't want to mention the party, but we know that there are some certain people that are not doing enough to protect the communities. And these are the people that say that they care about their communities. I mean, do you care about the communities when you're, you know, allowing polluters to destroy our environment? And this is a great time to discuss this issue because Earth Day, as I mentioned earlier, will be April 23rd. And we have so much to do. I mean, the whole nation has so much to do to prevent our species from disappearing from this earth. Because I think that's what we are talking about now. You know, somebody said it's code red. We got to take action now.
Right.
And so,
you know, this this group of chemicals in particular, you were talking about climate change. We're talking about the level of CO2 in the atmosphere that is causing the sea level to rise, is causing the climate to warm over a long period of time. You know, the trend is definitely up. And some of the disturbing things that we've recently seen in the Arctic and Antarctic that have, I think it was I think they said 5 days in a row, there were record temperatures in the Antarctic because of a climate change related thing that happened. And, you know, when we look at what, like you say, we are facing an existential crisis.
Absolutely.
And to allow companies like Saint-Gobain to continue to spew these chemicals, which I contend, and scientists are starting to understand now, that these chemicals are very dangerous greenhouse gas polluters, that they may actually be much more dangerous in terms of the contribution to global warming than we recognize right now, much more than methane or some of the other things. And you know, why are we still allowing this to happen? We need to prevent this from getting out of control any more than it already has. You know, we need to really pay attention to this. And you know, one of the important things is too to recognize is if you continue to pollute your environment and your water, you know, one of the things that's going to happen is here, and it's already happening here in the seacoast of New Hampshire, is sea levels rising.
There you go. The ice is melting, the sea levels are rising.
Yep.
There will be climate refugees.
Yes. And when that happens, there's less land for us to live on. And not only does flooding happen, so chemicals that are on the ground are spread into our water much more frequently than than before, you know, there were severe storms like that. But it's also encroaching underneath. Like in Florida, you probably heard how the seawater is coming into the water aquifers, the freshwater aquifers is invading them and creating less available drinking water. So when that happens, plus the water is contaminated by these chemicals, we're going to face a critical shortage of clean, fresh drinking water. And people are going to be pushed into areas which are much more concentrated, populated centers, and people are going to not have clean drinking water. So we have to do everything we possibly can, not only to slow the progression of climate change, but also to prevent further destruction of our water systems.
Right. And I understand some of the standards that the Biden administration is looking at has to do with 30-30, meaning 30% of the land has to be protected by our government. And I was looking earlier at, I subscribe to the Sierra Club magazine. I don't know, it probably doesn't show well because I have a blurred background.
Oh, you can see it.
You can see it, okay. So this magazine actually has a lot of information this month. I think this is the April issue, which I already got in March, that talks about that, and they talk about Iowa and nitrogen, affecting water. And there are ways to install filters and machines to extract the pollutants from the water. And they're talking about the possibility that some of these could be installed near the dams and near the aquifers. And there's so much to do. Removing plastic that's ending up in the rivers and in our ocean. And a lot of these things require community members to get involved, not just the government. But it would help if our local government, if our state government would be leading the way. They have the means, they have the knowledge, they have access to scientists like yourself and many others to help. And we're not seeing that. And it is very, very disturbing. And as you mentioned, Florida, I read up about some people moving from near the ocean and they have become climate refugees already in the state of Florida.
Right. Yeah, there's a big migration and gentrification going on in southern Florida in particular. But you bring up a good point. And so let's talk about plastics for a moment. There have been several attempts in the state of New Hampshire to remove plastic bags from our grocery stores. And those efforts have been fought so hard by the Grocers Association, the lobby, the very strong lobby. I actually was able to just recently take a quick family trip to Italy. And in Rome, you are not allowed to use plastic bags. You have to use these special biodegradable bags. and you have to bring them with you to the grocery store, or you can't buy groceries. They have been, they have no, there are issues in Rome, obviously, with the environmental issues otherwise, but they have really made some concerted steps to address this issue. And you're right. I mean, these plastic bags, a few years ago on Earth Day, I attended a film festival in Portsmouth. There was a film on plastic bags. And when you really think about all these plastic bags, you may be driving down the street and you see these plastic bags rolling around, especially near certain big box stores. Those end up somewhere, and they are very damaging to the environment. And there's absolutely no reason why.
There's no
The
reason.
Technology exists. We can do that.
And there are people who invented plastic replacements. I've seen
Yes.
videos of scientists that have already found ways to produce compostable bags and compostable products.
And they use them in
that can
Italy.
replace. Right. And these people that have invented it are not getting enough funding, and industry is not absorbing because they can get away with it. And this
Exactly.
takes us to, the name of this show is What Matters Most. It takes us to that point where we ask ourselves what matters most. Do we need more industry and more growth and more clothes and more of everything? Or do we need to streamline and do less and recreate a country and the world? Recreate the world with new habits that will not harm the environment. I don't mind. I recycle my clothes. I think this suit is, my husband's like, oh, I don't remember. I was like, well, it's probably 20 years old. I'm still wearing it. We don't have to buy new things and buy new furniture and buy plastic and period products. For example, menstruation causes a lot of pollution, and a lot of these little plastic that they put underneath or inside of the pads cause a lot of problems because women menstruate and they have a lot of plastic. They toss a lot of plastic. And my daughter was working with the Women Environmental Network, which works to advocate for women's rights, but they also do it in conjunction with initiatives and measures that help to protect the environment. And so she was focusing on the removal of plastic in menstrual products. And I learned a lot about how effective her organization was in London when she was there. Now she's moving she was with WEN, and now she's moving to the Tahiri Justice Center in San Francisco because she inherited
Excellent.
some of her mom's
you must be so proud.
activism. Yeah. I'm very proud of her. She's going to work with the Tahiri Justice Center to protect women, and they have all kinds of means to do that through lawyers and so forth. But that's the field she's in. But I've learned that it's the little things. Whenever you have a choice of not buying or consuming plastic, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Everybody can have a say, the community. And we do have some initiatives here in Londonderry. We created the Green Group, and I've had a member of the Green Group, the founder, was on this show. And they're doing little things. They're collecting plastic, and they're doing, planting trees and, doing things that they feel can help. And, plastic is a big one. And I also have always been big because I adopted the vegetarian diet about 8 years ago, and I was sick, and then I sort of became flexitarian, but I'm now vegetarian. But that's another thing. We can talk about the foods that we choose to eat. Beef is a big no-no, not just because, I used to love beef, but we have to think before we eat, before we dress up, before we use our cars more than necessary. When you use your car, you're polluting. And so every person should take responsibility. That does not mean to say that our government would get a pass, but they should do more. But education is what we need. And that's why I have you on this show, because you're providing us with so much information that I hope that will help so many people to understand. And please go ahead. I mean, if you have any other points you'd like to make in connection with the environment.
I think you bring up a very good point. I think, in New Hampshire, we benefit from very representative elected officials. But I don't think people recognize or pay attention. Every year we see how down ballot drop off is big when voting happens. I don't think people realize how important it is to make sure those elected representatives represent your values. And I think it's very important to have these grassroots community groups like you just talked about in your community. And we need to do more to connect those people, to form coalitions across the state, to provide transfer of information, to form these coalitions. Hey, this bill is coming up that's going to look at plastic bag use in our grocery stores in New Hampshire. And that network be firmed up so that more and more people understand the importance of those kinds of initiatives. And I think people don't really recognize, we have done a lot of organizing and then really have seen the benefit of that organizing in terms of pushing these elected officials to be accountable to us. A couple of years ago, there was a really important initiative going through the Senate, and we got 350 people to write emails to the senators in 48 hours. And senators reached out to me and said, where did you, what's going on? We have 350 emails from people in the last 48 hours who really want us to pass this piece of legislation. So it is recognized, your efforts, when you do that, you hit send on that little email that goes to the senators or to the House representatives or to the governor, those opinions and that voicing that opinion really matters. And it does have an effect. So right. I really love that story of, your local green committee forming, yep. But
green team.
It is amazing. And that kind of information really needs to get out more to the broader public across the state. And we need to be organized. The lobbyists absolutely are organized. You better, as a state representative, it when you receive all these lobbyist emails that tell you to vote for or against something, they're very organized and they have the money Absolutely. To back them up to do that. So we have to be that counter force. Absolutely. So that our voices are heard. So Absolutely. It's really important. I'm really glad to hear what I really love to see though too is there's been a lot of effort for high school students to get involved in these green communities across the state. There's a pretty active one in Salem. There's a pretty active one across the state. There's one on the Seacoast. That is something that I really value because this is the future of our children.
They are the future of our nation, of our right. towns, of our state. And they have to learn early. I mean, I have a grandchild now and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what didn't I do when I was raising my kids? And I'm thinking my granddaughter lives, well, the times are sort of not so different, but we are more aware of the dangers ahead. So the earlier we start teaching these children to protect our environment, the better. So the Green Team, in fact, I will have another Green Team guest in a feature show. They are reaching out to the middle school, to the high school, to see if we can have projects with children to learn to appreciate our environment. And I think all communities should do that. A town is not complete until we educate the young population because they will Exactly. be the adults of tomorrow.
Right, absolutely. And these are really not political issues. They shouldn't be. It should be, regardless of your party affiliation, you should be, involved and active in these issues because it's the future of your children. And it's very, it's heartening to see so many people starting to be really involved. And I think Earth Day every year, I'm more encouraged
right.
that
April
there are more
23rd.
And more people. Yes, right. More and more people are coming into the fold, and we need to keep that up. And thank you so much for having me on the show because it's really important
Absolutely.
to highlight these issues.
Absolutely. And I want, before we get to the next step, I wanted you to talk a little bit about your book. You have a book talking about women scientists and the difficulties of of being in that club of scientists as a woman. Can you talk about your book and tell us the title and when it's going to come out?
Yes, thank you so much. The title is Female Disruptors, Stories of Mighty Female Scientists. And it is coming out in May, I believe. I haven't heard otherwise from the publisher, but the publisher says it's going to come out in May. And I had amazing support from, I think it was 177 people participated in the pre-sale campaign, which is just amazing. And I'm so thankful to all those wonderful people that really pushed me to make sure I completed this book, because most people don't complete books, I found out, once they start writing them.
I started 3 or 4 books and I haven't finished any. So congratulations on doing.
But having that support really helped push me along. But, you know, as you said, the book is about my experiences as a female scientist, sort of taking the plunge from being an environmental scientist behind the scenes and working in the industry to making that transition to an advocate and an elected official, trying to make change with that background, and what my experiences were, both in the scientific field and the elected official field and the political field, as a woman, which we'd like to think maybe has, you know, improved over the past few decades, but when
not really, no.
Not really. I looked back at some of the people like Rachel Carson and how she was treated by the media and by the lobbyists, and I really connected with that. You know, I shared very similar experiences to her. I had industry lobbyists taking out letters to the editor across the state calling me emotional rather than science-based. And that has to be because I was a woman. I never cried or screamed or in testimony, but you know, that was an easy way to disregard my expertise. So
it's to discourage you from continuing, and that's not what we want. We want women to participate in all spheres of science and more girls to choose science. It's vital. It's vital.
Yes,
so
absolutely. And yeah, so it's my experiences. I took a look back historically at how women have been treated or how women have been involved in fighting for various things. Very interesting for me, myself. It was a research project for me that was really cathartic. Also up to present day scientists and what they're experiencing, what COVID-19 has done to many public health scientists. And then it talks about how we can make change for the future. How can we set up mentoring networks so that we ensure that young women enter and stay in STEM fields, because we need them at the table to handle all these complex challenges like climate change, like drinking water protection, that we know we've just been talking about. How do we make sure that women are at that table and leading the effort to make sure that we understand and create effective solutions for all of our communities? So it was a great experience writing the book. I look forward to having it come out. I think we just settled today on a cover design, which is so exciting, and I'll be putting that out to my network.
I would like to see that. I'd like to see that. You know, we will definitely have you back, and when the book comes out again, you know, when you start doing your, hopefully you'll do some kind of a book tour and come to Londonderry and help us hear the story and buy the book and give it to our daughters. And you know, you make us very proud. I'm very, very proud. Absolutely. And I just hope that other women will follow suit and do what you're doing, because our community, what we need, we have good communities, and, you know, I love Londonderry. I love the people. I mean, I also ran for office at one point.
Yes.
I ran for state rep, and I knocked on thousands of doors. People are just wonderful in this town.
Yes.
They are in need of support and unity and positive messages. And that's what will carry us forward in the 21st century and take us to a better place where we work together to combat global warming, to help prevent the disappearance of our species, because I truly believe that we're always just one step short of doing the wrong thing and you know, condemning human beings to what happened to dinosaurs. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, and I don't want to leave on a bad, a negative note either. I mean, I think one of the things I discovered while writing this book was that the COVID-19 pandemic, while it has been a tragic situation, very challenged everything from public health networks to, our healthcare system to our, our workers. It has also created a situation in which we have really the opportunity to reevaluate what we've been doing. And I think it has done that. I mean, I think a lot of people are really doing that. I think I see how a lot of people are now accepting only remote and hybrid work. We still have a big gender pay gap. New Hampshire, you mentioned in the beginning, has actually the largest gap in gender pay. 79 cents on the dollar women make in New Hampshire compared the largest gap on the eastern seacoast. We have opportunities to fix that now. And I think women are saying, I'm no longer going to do the 60 hours or 50 hours worth of work and traveling in my car to get there. I can do my work remotely now, or I can be a hybrid worker that gives you the combination of remote work, but also that, in-person work.
Right.
And I think, people have become more accustomed to seeing a cat come onto the screen as I talk on this Zoom. He hasn't done that yet, but
I think I have a cat in here behind me.
Or children. I mean, I think we need to say what's important. It's important for women to be in the workplace. It's also important for them to be integral to their family. And so we need to really come to a better balance for women, allowing them to be mothers, allowing them to have families, and also be part of that conversation.
Be part of the workforce.
Exactly.
Right.
And
right.
I want
to, just think about the price of the gasoline. Why would an employer choose to have an employee drive for miles to come to work when the price of gasoline is so high? And what does that do to the environment? It does a lot of bad things, because then our reliance on dirty fossil fuels persists.
Exactly.
And
Right.
we cannot replace that because people are not going to buy these hybrid vehicles because they're more expensive, they're not available yet, they're not affordable. So,
and the tax incentives have been
employers
removed.
have to be held accountable. Sorry?
Exactly. And the policies that made it much more affordable, the tax incentives, have been removed. That's entirely something that our elected officials can fix. That's a fixable situation, is to encourage the use of green and alternative fuels and alternative cars by policy changes that give rebates to the people that buy those cars or participate in those programs. But there was recently, while I kind of talk about the pandemic a little bit here and there, I was very involved in the public health response here in New Hampshire, and calling out what I felt was wrong at the time, and supporting what was right. But we all kind of look upon the COVID-19 pandemic as a tragic situation, but like, as I said, there have been some changes that have made the workforce, much more amenable for women. But also there was a 2022 World Happiness Report that just came out a couple of weeks ago. And the pandemic really has made
World Happiness. That's fantastic.
Happiness Report. And what they found was the highest acts of kindness and benevolence happened in the last year, according to their survey. In terms of generosity, volunteerism, donations, and just caring for other people. We're at their highest rates in the last year than has ever been in the years that I think they started their surveys in 2006. So that tells you that is an amazing silver
positive
lining.
I think that is incredibly positive.
Yes,
that is a really encouraging thing to hear, that kindness is on the rise, that people are being aware of their environment, their communities, their politicians, their friends, and their neighbors, and that's what we need. I'm all for love and not war. And, you know, my
Absolutely.
previous guest last month was of Ukrainian descent, and we talked about the war in Ukraine. And, you know, her grandmother was born here, but she was 100% Ukrainian. And so she's a sort of third generation Ukrainian American. And we were talking about that. We're talking about the importance of kindness and of people caring about each other. And on this show, I always say, treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And that's, you know, as a human rights lawyer myself, a non-practicing human rights lawyer, I still believe that treating each other the way you'd like to be treated is the easiest way to explain what human rights is. It's, you know, you're protecting your fellow American or your fellow human being because you want them to receive the sort of treatment that you'd like to receive, which includes clean water, clean environment, you know, respect, dignity, racial justice, environmental justice, and the list goes on.
Absolutely.
It's quite a long list of things that we can do. But I absolutely am so delighted that you took the time, and it's been a while. I've been trying to get you on the show for a while, and we couldn't figure out how to do it because, as you know, there is no internet in a Comcast cable station. The internet connectivity there is not good. I've had to do, you know, for this show, I did an intro at the studio, and then I had to rush home to do the Zoom call. But I'm very grateful that you came today and you shared all these thoughts with us. And do you have a website for your book that we could put up?
It's not live yet. I do have, it is Mindi Messmer author at, actually, I should send it to you. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I have a Facebook page.
You can just Google Mindi Messmer author.
Right. Yeah, but so excited. So thankful that you were able to make this work technically. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's opening up new opportunities for me and the show, because so many people cannot come to the studio. So you'd be the first one. And being a scientist, you made sure technology was used to.
Yeah. And, you know, that's another thing. You know, scientists around the world have really connected. You know, I was able to interview so many scientists for my book that I ordinarily probably would have been much more challenging to interview. But because everybody is so used to now being remote and being hybrid, it presented a really unique opportunity to connect with these people, to these wonderful women that I present in my book.
Absolutely. It's just a beautiful thing that technology is helping, you know, science is helping. And then now we're talking about kindness being on the rise, people caring more about each other and doing things for the betterment and improvement of the community. I'm so glad we're ending on this positive note, because that's what we want. We want people to work together and to make their communities strong and protect their water and protect their environment. Just don't wait for others to do it. We can all take the initiative and do it ourselves.
Yes, very well said.
Well, thank you so much, Mindi. I am hoping that we will have you again sometime. You know, come back anytime and share some happy or bad or good or bad news with us. We so enjoyed having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
until
much.
Next time.
And we come to the last part of our show. We thank our guest, Mindi Messmer, and we thank Erin Berry, who is our editor and director, and all the volunteers that make this show possible in the Londonderry Access Community TV. And we hope that you'll join us next month. I hope that this show will help us to be better stewards of our environment. Thank you for watching.